light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Today I just wanted to offer a few thoughts about, what I refer to as prayer, but for me prayer is a very general sort of heading. Spirituality ultimately is about relating to that which is greater than ourselves. For some people this is a personified deity of a particular name. For some it may simply be the universe, maybe spirit or something, maybe divine mystery, maybe some foreign word or a word from a different language that refers to the divine with something kind of like a name, but it's a name that essentially translates as a sort of all that is, or mystery, or something like that. Prayer to me is simply the actions, the dynamic, the way of relating between the two. For some people it may take the form of specific repetitious words. For some people it may be no words at all. It may be a picture in their mind. It may be an emotion they feel, that they visually, or that they visualize within themselves with their eyes closed, visualize this emotion rising up inside of them like a ball of light and rising from their head into the heavens, so that it's like an emotional communication with the divine. For someone who maybe has a more atheistic belief system, or one that doesn't involve a particular deity, it might be a point of awareness or an acceptance of things being what they are, or looking at a Hubble telescope picture and just being present with that feeling of awe, of just not rushing on to the next thought, but simply staying focused on the picture and allowing your whole being to feel this kind of wow. And perhaps not even being able to find the words to express what you're feeling, but being present with that feeling and not running away from it just because it's unfamiliar or uncertain or mysterious. So there's praying with the heart, there's praying with the mind, there's praying with the whole body. There's the saying that he who sings prays twice. Maybe it's 3 times then if he who sings, if someone is singing and dancing the words and meanings of their prayer. I saw a very beautiful presentation once of the old Irish blessing, may the road rise with you, and so forth, that had been not only set to music so it could be sung, but also choreographed as a dance with movements that illustrated the different parts of the blessing. It's a general sort of blessing. It's just, may the road rise with you, may the wind be always at your back, may the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall softly on your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of God's hands. A sort of invoking of divine protection in all the journeys one might make. I don't think there's anything in that really contradicts any belief system. It's asking for a harmonious relationship of wisdom and love with that which is greater than ourselves. And that to me is at the heart of what all prayer is. That a meditation can be a prayer, an incantation can be a prayer. My pagan friends refer to spell casting. I think what they're basically doing is just another form of prayer. If you want to call it a spell, go ahead. It is what it is. But the point is, and in that sense, it gets interesting because learning about the different ways that people pray, the different ways that people relate to that which is greater than themselves, that they communicate with the divine or with the spiritual, can shed light on the different possibilities that are available to us and the different things that are helpful to those possibilities. a lot of times in talking with my friends who are pagan, they'll talk about infusing the sacramental or symbolic object with your intention, or charging it, as they say, the same way you would charge a battery. To take an object and hold it in your hands and think about all the love that you are choosing for it to represent, choosing a talisman or a statue of some sort to represent a journey you'll be taking, and then doing something with that object to represent the protection that you want to be surrounding the journey throughout the time you're making it. These are all simply forms of communicating with that which is greater than ourselves, though. And the problem becomes when people try to take these things and make them into recipes instead of expressions of relationship. To me, whether it's meditation, prayer, a chanted mantra, sitting in silence, opening oneself to the mystery of the universe, or focusing on a particular word or sound, or playing an instrument and really tuning into how the music feels, not just how it sounds. With all of those things, that it be a relationship with that which is greater than ourselves in which we engage, rather than a recipe, an incantation, something that specifically is attached to an expectation, that when I say these words, this is going to happen. Maybe, maybe not. For whatever it is to happen, you have to consider what influences or affects that outcome, and how much of that can we control, and how much of it can we not control. Because there's a lot of things that have to do with outcomes that we really don't have the control we would need to guarantee the outcome we want. We can still make our best contribution and hope that we get there, and sometimes we do. But life doesn't come with guarantees. And there's probably a bit of wisdom in that as well. That if it did come with guarantees, there's a chance that we wouldn't take our prayers as seriously as we should, in order to maintain our relationship of wisdom and love with that which is greater than ourselves. I suppose if we didn't have to work for it, if we didn't have to go through all those rigors, if we could just follow the steps and ta-da, we get what we want, like put a quarter in the machine and the candy comes out. If recipes worked, it seems to me that could also lead to a certain mental emotional laziness, that we really wouldn't be paying attention to the spiritual entity with whom we're collaborating, that it would be simply a matter of following the rules and expecting that nothing more would be required. The example that jumps to mind is a parent raising a child and saying, for example, be home by 9 o'clock. And the child comes home at 9 o'clock, but is all grumpy about being ordered home. I really wanted to stay out till 9:30. And so, and consequently, all this grumbling goes on to where the parent begins to feel like, well, if you can't do it and agree with me that I'm making the right choice here, maybe we need to renegotiate or something. And yet the parent is using their greater experience and the fact that they are responsible for this child and so forth to try to encourage and nurture the best possible outcome for this child, trying to teach them self-discipline and a certain reliability, that when asked to do things on time, they happen on time. And to find ways of doing that and understand that it's a relationship that is intended to be mutually nurturing. And because it's intended to be mutually nurturing, to find ways of being grateful. And if there are ways that the relationship isn't working, to bring those up for constructive dialogue and not to wait for the other person to guess that there's a problem. The child who comes home and griping and complaining about coming home, being told to be home by 9 o'clock, and hopefully the parent having the time or the interest, the ability to say, wait a minute, why are you upset about this? Do you think what I asked was unreasonable? Do you think there should be something else? Is there something else that happened in your day that has nothing to do with this, but because you couldn't answer that situation, you're projecting your discontent onto this situation? That happens a lot, where people are angry at us, but they're not really angry at us. They're angry at that person they talked with half an hour ago. They just haven't found a way to adjust or cope with the fact that that happened, and they're still stuck in that moment half an hour later, replaying this over and over and over in their mind. And somebody needs to give them the freedom to say, take a time out, deal with it however you need to, and once you're ready to move on, come back and we'll collaborate on what we're doing here and now, rather than dealing with the person who is emotionally stuck 30 minutes in the past. When we engage in this kind of relationship with the divine, with, for me, divine mystery, there may be perceptions or experiences that suggest gender, orientation, race, whatever. I don't know that that's anything to necessarily be upset about, but to me it has a lot more to do with how the divine chooses to reveal itself. The way the divine reveals itself to me may not be effective for you. What should concern me is that you have your own empowering experience of relating to the divine. Whether that's male, female, spirit, none of the above, or whatever. That you have a nurturing, empowering experience of relating to that which is greater than yourself, so that it gives you some place to keep growing and new things to discover and new ways to expand who and what you are. The philosopher Socrates, I believe it was, made the comment that the unexamined life is not worth living. I think that's a general theme that you'll find within almost every religion and philosophical belief system, that there are moments when we need to look in the mirror. And noticing how we talk to the divine is yet one more way of looking in the mirror and seeing where we're really at. We may be, on one hand, trying to be what people want us to be and going through the motions, and on the other hand, it's not honest. It's not who and where we are. So being able to trust God, trust the divine enough that we can be totally honest with the divine and say, I'm saying the words, but this is not how I'm feeling. I would really like to get the two back in sync, rather than feeling one way and acting another, and feeling like I'm being torn apart into two people, to put the two back together and say, now is not the time for this, or I need to do my prayer differently today. Yesterday, maybe I needed to sit quietly with my legs crossed on the floor and meditate and focus deeply on each word. Maybe today there is so much energy that I just have to pace the floor. And something about that pacing burns off the energy enough that I can begin to relax and begin to focus and begin to find that quiet place within me where I can actually, in some metaphorical sense, hear the voice of the divine telling me what needs to happen. There's probably more than enough arguments around the world about whether the divine really exists or not, and according to what definition, but that's not the point of this episode. And it's the problem, I suppose, with that sort of line of discussion is that there are a lot of things in the world that may be true, and we can't prove that they are true, and we can't prove that they're not. But the thing I like about prayer, I guess, is that you don't have to know for certain that God is this or that or the other thing. In sifting out that relationship, just believing in the possibility is frequently all you really need. allowing the possibility. I have New Age belief friends who talk about having multiple lives, and there are actually a number of different spiritual and philosophical belief systems that think of the human soul as being eternal and going through multiple lifetimes. I don't know that I could prove it one way or the other. There are certain things that are easier to explain if it is true, and there are certain things that tell me if it is true, it's not true in the way that everyone thinks. It's kind of like saying if someone's going to give you a car, and immediately they get an image of some kind of car in their mind, and what shows up may be a three-wheeled vehicle, or a pickup truck, or it may be bigger or smaller than the person originally envisioned. But if the point is simply to have reliable transportation from point A to point B, any one of them will work. The point is not which vehicle you're using, but the fact that you're making the journey. So in addressing prayers, if someone wants to do it as a spell and infuse it with their energy, with their intention, that I'm doing this because this is what I want to happen. At the same time, it becomes problematic if you infuse it with something that is, for lack of a better word, questionable. The basic rule of thumb, I'm told, among my pagan friends is that whatever you send out comes back threefold. In the Bible, it's phrased as whatever you sow, you reap. And also as the golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The idea that whatever you put out comes back. In my understanding of life in the universe, I would say everything is so interconnected that you have to be very careful what you put out, because there is a sense in which everything out there is part of or an extension of yourself. And granted, there are lots of different sort of perspectives and minds out there, and some of them I meet and it's like I could not possibly agree that this person may in some sense be a part of me as I am a part of the whole human race, but I can see where they're broken, where they're in need of healing, and I don't necessarily have the ability to grant that healing. I don't have the resources to give them what they need. But in order to contribute to the holistic healing and integration of the universe within which I live, and to validate the interconnectedness of life, that everything is dependent upon everything else, I still need to do whatever I can to encourage healing in that individual. Essentially, going back to the golden rule, as they call it, the do unto others as you would have them do unto you, what I try to extend to that person is exactly what I would hope to receive if I were ever in their position. Which, there may be every reason to think that I would never be in their position, because I've made other choices that have kept any of those things from happening. Okay, fine, maybe you will never be in that position, but still, if you were, what are the resources and the assistance and the dynamics you would want to be available so that you could recover, heal, cope, whatever word you want to use, with whatever circumstance or relationship or challenge with which you're dealing. But this is, again, where this brings us back to the basic distinction mentioned earlier, that it's not a recipe, it's a relationship. It's not a formula, it's not a superstition. I'm reminded of the time I was in a Christian bookstore in Kansas, and there were business cards on the counter next to the cashier. 99 cents for one of these printed cards or whatever. And on one side of the card it had what is commonly known as the Sinner's Prayer in numerous Protestant circles, essentially a set of words that has to do with repenting of sin and claiming, accepting the role that Jesus played of being Savior, and basically validating the core theology of institutionalized Christianity. And then it said the stand within which these cards were displayed, by the way, said simply, "Do you want to get your relatives saved? Give them this." And then you read the prayer on the one side of the card, and it says "turn over" or "see other side," and so you flip it over, and it says, "Congratulations, you are now a Christian entitled to eternal life," and yada 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 yada. And I describe myself as a Christian in the sense of one who aspires to be Christ-like, not necessarily in the sense of one who adheres to the tenets of any example of institutionalized Christianity. But the basic point, I guess, to me in that moment was when I flipped it over and saw it was on the other side. I was absolutely and completely offended that the notion of a relationship with the divine had been reduced to no more than an incantation. The notion being that if you simply say the words, that everything's going to be fine. Well, I really don't see where that's what happens every time. Theologically, according to some people, that might mean that yes, you'll now get to go to heaven, whatever that means. But I haven't yet met anyone who has made that statement, who has any first-hand knowledge of what heaven is like or what to expect. They're simply going on theological perspectives and interpretations that have been handed down through multiple languages for over 1,000 years. The problem with all those interpretations, especially if you know the limits of language in general, is that it becomes almost impossible to make any legitimate claim of accuracy. There are just too many ways where a subtle cultural or linguistic nuance can change everything. Such as try explaining sometime the difference between self-awareness and self-consciousness. To someone who did not grow up with English, because the meanings of the two words are almost identical in terms of the dictionary, and yet one has a specifically positive connotation and the other specifically negative connotation. All of which comes back to, why are we doing this prayer thing in the first place? Is it just so we can cope with adversity here on earth? I think personally that it has a lot more to do with the growth of your soul. That ultimately everything in this life is not about whether you have the luck to be born into a wealthy family of a particular race, but rather whatever happens, how much you learn by it. That whether you're rich or poor, black and white, male or female, gay or straight, whatever categorical label you want to use for reference purposes, that for all of these, it's about a relationship. It's about an ongoing day-to-day relationship. It's about communication. It's about life finding its form one day at a time. It's about recognizing everything that has been included, for all essential purposes, was supposed to be included. Whether you want to say it's the result of scientific principles or divine intervention, I wasn't there. I can't honestly say which it was. There's a whole lot of things we can prove, and there's things that we can't prove, and there's things we can't disprove. But to allow the possibility that when we least expect it, things really do sometimes magically go absolutely right, in defiance of all probability and statistics. Probability and statistics may say that there's a 75% chance that someone is going to die of cancer in the next 6 months. And lo and behold, they're still alive 10 years later. Well, what happened? Did somebody lie? Well, they were making a projection. They probably did so with the most sincerity they could. But there's more to each moment than that. And just as there is a part of ourselves that is spiritual and emotional and psychological and way more than physical, there is something spiritual, I believe, that when we least expect it, seems to make a difference. That as often as things can go completely wrong, and there are days when I swear that Murphy's Law is working on steroids, because there are so many things going wrong that it just seems like Murphy's Law, the notion that anything that can go wrong will, and at the worst possible time. Sometimes that's what seems to be happening. It seems to sometimes happen less if I understand more of what's going on. But sometimes even understanding everything that's going on doesn't change the difficult outcome that I'm going to have to integrate within that moment. In any case, there's lots of different possibilities, but the basic point is to communicate, to listen, and to answer, to respond back to relating to something greater than yourself. If we don't, I find that our lives become small and petty, that there's something about being all of who we are and doing all of what we can do in the best possible, most loving and wise way we can, that allows the soul to grow, so that it's not so much a question of what you experienced as what you learned from what you experienced. In any case, thank you very much for joining me on the show today, and may you be richly and abundantly blessed in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Thank you.